Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roche Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. The very first transfer portal video I made in this college basketball offseason was about the Gonzaga Bulldogs when they landed former Pepperdine forward Michael Ajayi, and I thought that was a really good addition then. But ever since then, Gonzaga's been really quiet. You haven't heard that much. And sometimes no news is good news because Gonzaga, all they've basically done is returned every single player from last season's team that was an important contributor outside of Anton Watson. Everybody else is back, and that's why Gonzaga right now is a preseason top 10 team in college basketball for next season, according to preseason polls. And now Gonzaga has just landed a really good transfer portal addition, a pure bucket getter that has been on plenty of teams that have not been very good, and now he has an opportunity to be a part of a great team and be able to contribute in a variety of ways. And that player is Khalif Battle, the former Arkansas, the former Temple, and former Butler guard, who is now committed to the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I'm going to go over what role I think Khalif Battle will have for Gonzaga next season and what Gonzaga's roster is looking like for next season and whether I think they are legitimately a top 10 team for next season. Now, a lot of teams in college basketball, even teams that have great coaches and great cultures, they can't keep players to stay in their program. Those guys end up going off to the NBA, which is understandable. If you're a great player, you got to go off to the pros. But a lot of times, starters are leaving programs for other programs. I've used the Rylan Griffin example a ton of times. He was a starter for Alabama this past season. Alabama made the Final Four. There's no reason you would think he would leave, but he ended up transferring to Kansas. So it is what it is. Just the nature of the transfer portal and the day and age that we live in college basketball. No player is safe from leaving your program. But the Gonzaga Bulldogs have had one of the best off seasons of any team in college basketball when it comes to roster continuity. Anton Watson is a big loss, but he is gone. Nothing you can do about that. But every single player other than him is back, and some of these players are really good. Nembhard averaged 13 points per game and 7 assists and 4 rebounds this past year for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. He could have gone off to the NBA if he wanted to. I don't know if he would have gotten drafted or not, but his brother, Andrew Nembhard, he's in the NBA. He's a good player for the Indiana Pacers. But Rod Nembhard, he's gotten better every single year in college basketball. And even though his points per game didn't really uptick from his time when he was at Creighton, his assist numbers at 7 per game, and the fact that he really does a lot of things well on the basketball floor, and he led the Gonzaga Bulldogs to a lot of success this past season, and he is what you want a lead point guard to be. He sets up his teammates, he gets everybody involved, and he gets his buckets when he has to and when he's feeling it. And when you look at a guy like Ron Nembhard returning to the Gonzaga Bulldogs, he's going to automatically be one of the best point guards in college basketball again next season. And then his backcourt teammate, Nolan Hickman, he's back as well, and he improved tremendously this past season for the Bulldogs. He averaged more points per game than Ron Nembhard at 14 points per game. He also averaged 3 assists and a couple boards. I thought he was a guy that could have tested the NBA draft waters because of the amount of improvement he showed this past season. But with his return, it gives Gonzaga one of the best starting backcourts in college basketball. Michael Ajayi, as I already mentioned, coming over from Pepperdine, he averaged 17 points per game and 10 boards this past season. And he was the best player on a really bad team this past year. And now he's going to be able to be on a team that has good players. And even though his points per game is going to dip probably to around 10 points per game next season, that's fine. He's going to be able to slide into that small forward role for Gonzaga next year, and I think he's going to do well. Ben Gregg averaged 9 points per game and 6 boards this past season for the Gonzaga Bulldogs, and he's a guy that I think is just going to continue to get better. I know he's been in college basketball for a couple seasons, so it's not like he's a guy that's just becoming a sophomore. He still has a lot of potential, but I just like Ben Gregg's game. He works harder than almost any player in college basketball. He's the ultimate glue guy, and I think that's going to help propel him, even at this stage of his career, to possibly be an even better player next season. And then Graham Ike averaged 17 points per game and 7 boards. Gonzaga's getting him back for one more go around, and he's a guy that actually can step out and shoot a little bit, but he is kind of an old school big still, and that's probably why the NBA isn't really looking at him for the draft, but maybe he still has NBA potential in his future. I don't know, but still great for Gonzaga to have him back. He's going to be one of the best centers in college basketball next season. And look at that starting five. If that ends up being the starting five for Gonzaga next season, that's a really great starting five where every single player is going to contribute at a high level. You can't get much better than that. And that's without even mentioning Khalif Battle, who Gonzaga's just brought in. And look at what Khalif Battle has scored throughout his college career. He has averaged 15 points per game, 21 points per game, 18 points per game, and 15 points per game in his last 4 seasons in college basketball. This dude can flat out score. And the fact that he has never really been on a good team in college basketball is not necessarily his fault because he's done his job. He scored a ton of points. It's just his teammates have let him down. And he transferred from Temple to Arkansas this past season with the hopes that he was going to be able to contribute on a really great team because Eric Musselman had great teams the past few years at Arkansas, but Arkansas just wasn't all that good this past year, and he still put up great numbers, averaging 15 points per game and 3 boards, and he did that in less than 25 minutes played per game. That's great. That's very impressive. He shot 35% from 3, which is solid for being on a team that was under 500 this past season in the SEC, so he had a lot of players targeting him, so it's not like he had easy looks, and 35% is still a very solid percentage from outside. He shot 40% from the field, which is low, but he is a guy that takes a lot of shots and sometimes not necessarily good looking attempts, so that's fine. And he shot 87% at the line, which goes to show you that he's a really good shooter, and that's not a fluke either. He's been a good free throw shooter his whole entire career outside of his true freshman season. So I think that Khalif Battle is going to be one of those guys that at the end of games, Gonzaga is going to want to give him the ball, allow him to get fouled, hit the free throws, and that's going to help them squeak out of a lot of games. And when you look at the Gonzaga Bulldogs roster and the fact that Khalif Battle's more than likely not going to be a starter, and I don't think that's what Khalif Battle wants. He kind of fits that role as a 6th man off the bench like a lot of NBA teams have. Lou Williams made a living in the NBA being that 6th man off the bench. He won 6th man of the year a few times, and he was a great player for many years. I don't know if Khalif Battle will be an NBA player or not, but if he is an NBA player one day, that's going to be his role, and I think that is fantastic for the Gonzaga Bulldogs to have a guy that's probably going to average double-digit points next season. Even though he's going to be on the best team that he's ever played on in college basketball, I still think Khalif Battle, as long as he plays over 20 minutes per game, he's going to score enough points to average over 10 points per game and give Gonzaga some big buckets off the bench and a boost of energy, especially if your starting unit's struggling. Sometimes it's great to just have that guy come off the bench and give you a lift. And Steele Venters, he's back from this past season as well. He didn't even play for Gonzaga because he had a torn ACL when he was at Eastern Washington. He averaged 15 points per game and 3 boards. I think he should have some role on Gonzaga's team next season. Braden Huff averaged 9 points per game and 3 boards. He's a guy that's going to be able to play behind Ben Gregg and Graham Ike, probably get around 20 to 25 minutes per game. And he's still a young player that was really talented out of high school, and he showcased a lot of ability this past season. I think he's only going to get better, and that's another great piece to have off the bench. Gonzaga has a deep team. And then Dusty Stromer as well, who averaged 5 points and 3 boards. He was another highly touted guy out of high school. The Bulldogs are looking really good for next season. And I can't reiterate enough how important it is that the Bulldogs are returning 7 of their top 8 players from this past season. And now they just brought in 2 quality transfers in Michael Ajayi and Khalif Battle. No other program in college basketball that I can think of off the top of my head is returning a core unit of that many great players. A lot of these teams, maybe they're returning 3 of their top 5 players or 4 of their top 7 players, but Gonzaga's returning 7 of their top 8 players. Outside of Anton Watson, all the guys are back. Graham Ike probably will be the WCC Player of the Year next season. Gonzaga's probably going to have the best bench player in the league in Khalif Battle. They got other quality bench players as well, and they're going to have a top backcourt in college basketball in Nolan Hickman and Ron Nimhard. All these guys are experienced. Most of these guys have been playing college basketball for 3 or 4 years. They have a lot of NCAA tournament success. Khalif Battle is a very experienced player in college basketball who is a pure bucket getter, and Gonzaga was able to land him over Villanova and Kansas State, so some pretty stiff competition there. Villanova could have definitely used a guard like Khalif Battle, and he's from New Jersey, so that would have been geographically a better fit, but nope, he's wanting to go out west in his final season of college basketball and possibly be able to win a lot of games. And Gonzaga, being in the WCC, they're going to win a lot of games, but it's more about what they do in the NCAA tournament and in the non-conference. That's what people care about when it comes to Gonzaga, but I do think the Bulldogs are legitimately going to be a top 10 team in college basketball next season. They should be very dangerous, returning 7 of your top 8 players and bringing in 2 quality transfers, and Gonzaga might not even be done yet. There's still a couple roster spots left that Mark Few can tinker with. Maybe he can bring in a backup big, and if he can do that, then I think the Gonzaga Bulldogs are going to be a very fun team to watch, an experienced team, and now they got one of the best bucket getters in college basketball to light up the scoreboard next season for what should be a top 10 team in college basketball next season. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about the former Arkansas Temple and Butler guard Khalif Battle committing to the Gonzaga Bulldogs, and whether you believe that he will be a 6th man off the bench for the Bulldogs next season and provide a lot of offense for Gonzaga, and how you feel the Gonzaga roster is shaping up for next season, and whether you believe that the continuity that they have from last season's roster is going to help make Gonzaga a great team in college basketball again next season. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.